Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zelzer from PCDN Global here with Anshuman Tapna, the founder of Terra.do, which is one of the coolest climate career upskilling platforms in the world. A little bit about this episode. So this is season 9, episode 13, the last episode of the season of the Social Change Career Podcast. This episode is supported by the Rotary Peace Fellowship, which is one of the world's coolest fellowship for impact professionals. If you are looking for a fully funded master's degree or professional certificate at one of their 8 partner universities around the world, check it out. And fully funded, amazing experience, and applications open, I think, February 1st and go, I think, until May 1st. So check out the Rotary Peace Fellowship. For people who haven't joined us before, as we're starting off, please put in the chat box and LinkedIn, or if you're watching on Twitter or YouTube, where you're watching from. I'll ask questions for about 10 minutes, and then we'll try to bring as many questions and comments from the audience. The Social Change Career Podcast, we're up to about 100 episodes with innovators and change makers from all parts of the world. I think 25 countries in every sector, from innovative finance to reducing gender-based violence to tech for social impact. So if you like this episode, please check out the 100 other episodes in any of the major podcasting platforms, and feel free to share and or give us reviews, because that helps a lot in advancing our impact. So I will summarize Anshuman's bio. If I read his whole bio, we would be here for quite a while. And again, as we're getting started or anytime throughout the chat, feel free to put in the chat box where you're watching from, a bit about yourself. Nice to see you, Raju from Boulder, sustainability and SDGs. So I will summarize Anshuman's bio. He's the founder of Terra.do, the global platform for learning and working in climate, which every job should be a climate job. He's been a serial tech entrepreneur, started 4 companies, has sold 2, starting up while undergrad at IIT in Bombay. He did graduate MBA, a business school at Stanford. He worked in selling solar lights in Vietnam and started a nonprofit that helped Indian elected officials develop their constituencies, all while working with Deloitte, then worked for Google in New York. He moved to Bangalore, India in 2009 to start Mygola, a travel planning app that was acquired by Make My Trip, where he was their chief product officer until 2019, when a classic midlife crisis, we'll have to ask what classic means, because I had a midlife crisis as well that led me quitting Georgetown, eventually moving to Medellin. Sent him in search for what was truly worth working on. He currently lives in Stanford, where his wife is finishing her PhD in the School of Sustainability. He has 2 kids and often takes time off to hang out with them, get climate inspiration and career advice from his children. So Anshuman, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom, your energy, and in full transparency, Catalina, my wife, and I, we do small scale angel investing, nothing large scale. So we are very small investors in Terra.do. And I think it is a brilliant platform, and I've already interacted with quite a few people who've been through their programs. So again, please let us know where you're watching from, and we'll bring in your questions throughout the chat. And Anshuman, to start off with, thank you again for joining us. It looks like you have beautiful weather in Stanford, amazing campus. Can you talk a little bit across your career? What has been the type of change that you've been seeking to impact, or has that been consistent, or it's changed over time?
First of all, thank you so much, Craig, for having me here. It's been such a privilege to be working, to have the opportunity to work on social impact. I've done that sometimes through nonprofits in my career, sometimes through for profits. And this is the first time, in fact, where I feel that profit and purpose are aligning together so nicely. It's obviously the existential crisis of our times, climate change, and I've been thinking about what led me up to this path. So one of the fortunate things that happened to me was that my wife and I both graduated from Stanford in the same year that Steve Jobs gave his famous speech about staying hungry and staying foolish. And he had this line in his speech about how you should trust life itself because the dots will eventually connect. So I grew up in small town India. Both my parents are doctors, but in the government service, which means that they were always out and about seeing 100+ patients every day. In fact, I calculated that recently when they retired, that between the two of them, they've seen 1 million patients. So there's a bit of that which is already kind of I guess subconsciously playing in my mind. One of my proudest moments while I was an undergrad was the fact that at that time, this is back in 1998, 1999 in India, when students would not really start companies. Students would go find jobs or go for further studies. And on a lark, I decided to spend a lot of time, literally 2 years of my time in undergrad, trying to get entrepreneurship and startups happening out of the campus. And one thing led to another, where we now have this thriving ecosystem, not just at IIT Bombay but across the country for startups. But second, also that I ended up creating my own company as part of dog fooding what I was preaching to everyone else. So that's that line of thinking, which is it is important to build, and it is even more powerful to build something that helps others build, is the through line through all the impact things that I've done. That's how the dots connect. Even at Terra, if you look at what we're trying to do, the reason why uh, our mission is to get 100 million people working in climate this decade. And the reason why that is the mission is because I just feel the most incredible amount of energy is latent inside all of us with our skills. And if I could somehow use Terra's platform to unlock that amongst all these individuals, we would have climate solutions which are relevant to each geography, each problem all across the world, instead of trying to solve it with one silver bullet. So this whole through line, this connecting the dots, which is all focused on uh, just unlocking potential amongst others, is, I guess, the social impact lens that I have worn.
Wonderful. And thank you. Welcome, Roger. Welcome, Anne from the UK, Isabel from Seattle. Other people, please let us know where you're watching from. And I know one person had problems with sound, switched to her laptop. So I think everyone else says it's working correctly. So one question. So, can you describe what you feel comfortable sharing, like this midlife crisis? And then how in the world did you go from, I mean, one, that your parents have collectively seen a million patients is incredible to even fathom that and the impact they've had on their patients and their families. But how did you go from kind of, startups to this bold vision of trying to help 100 million people get into climate jobs? So did you wake up in the middle of the night? It was a burning passion. You had an inspiring conversation. So where did this come from?
No, great, thank you. So let me talk about the midlife crisis, and I hope at least some people here will relate to that. So I have two kids, a 13-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy. I had always been climate anxious. And I think the first time when it started registering in the foreground of my life was when I took the kids to the Great Barrier Reef. My daughter at that time was old enough to snorkel in those beautiful waters, and this is 2016. But my son was too young, so he was on the ship. And that was the first year when, because of global warming, mass bleaching happened on the reef, and about 30% of the reef died. And I realized with a shock a year later that I was taking it for granted that the world would be a better place for my kids when it was not a given at all, and I had been not paying attention. So that's what started the journey for me. And then about 2019, when I was trying to reframe, when I had this midlife crisis, one of the framings that really helped me was something that came from Yuval Harari's one of his books, in which he talks about how we often live our life in 5-year and 15-year projects. And I realized that all my life, all the startups that I had done, all the companies that I had worked for were all 5-year projects. I mean, where the expected outcome was supposed to happen in 5 years. My kids were maybe a 15-year project, whether I liked it or not. But Harari asked about 50-year projects, 50. I was like, okay, interesting. I'm turning 40. What's a 50-year project that I can imagine doing for the rest of my life, essentially? And I started making a list, and right on top of that list, the climate crisis emerged right there. So I started diving in. And my way of learning about a new space is to talk to as many people as I can, and ended up speaking to 200 plus people, everything from nuclear fusion to environmental justice, trying to answer the question of how I could use my skills to work in climate. And frankly, thought that the entire process had so much friction. So that was one insight. But the other insight was that when you look at the climate crisis and frankly, the solutions required, it's also an opportunity to build a completely different kind of world altogether. And you see that you have to transform energy, agriculture, transportation, manufacturing, even horizontals like finance. And you realize that you need to get 100 million people like me working in climate this decade. So the combination of these two, that there is friction in transitioning into climate, and second, that we'll need to do this 100 million plus times, suggested to me that there is an opportunity to build something which can act like a ramp and will take people who are outside climate into climate over the next decade. And that's what Terra ended up becoming.
Okay. Thank you so much. So welcome. We've got people from all over. I mean, I'm based in Medellin, Colombia, so I don't know if we have any people from Latin America. Welcome, Deba from Winnipeg, Marisha from Vienna, someone from Ghana. So please let us know where you're watching from and feel free to start adding your questions and comments. So one question about your career path, because you kind of went from, let's say, the consulting world to the tech world to the startup world. What is your advice? Like, one, you've done multiple pivots. So what is your advice both for people who are, the average age of our community tends to be 32, but we have people, from 22 to 60. So people who are trying to upskill or develop their first set of skills, like how do you develop the skills that are needed to work in impact careers? And then how have you gone about transitioning from sectors? And what do you advise the people who are trying to move to a new sector or a new field?
No, that's great. I think first step of that is to understand, in my opinion, um, who you are and what works well for you. So, for example, it took me some time to realize that I'm fundamentally a builder at heart. I like to build things. I like to build new things. And therefore, there were multiple forks in the road where it felt like there was a non-builder path. And to me, it became clear over a period of time that I was not going to go down those paths. So that was one, which is just kind of question yourself on that. I think the second one is a bit of there's a fox and the hedgehog analogy, which is, are you a hedgehog who has a very specific, deep way of looking at the world? And you look at the entire world through that lens, which is totally fine too. Or are you a fox who knows a little bit about a lot many things and therefore are fundamentally a connector? And I see myself as a fox. I see myself as someone who has fundamentally been curious about everything. So even when I was at my MBA program at Stanford, I was supposed to be doing business school classes. Instead, I was doing also an entire year of med school, just because I was curious, an entire year of Mandarin and fencing and international diplomacy, because I'm just curious about all these things. And I realized that the work that I wanted to do on the social impact side was one that integrated a lot of these different aspects of humanity in one place. And in that sense, climate is as they say in Silicon Valley, it's a great founder problem fit for me, because climate is technology, but it is also policy, it is also justice, it is also history, and economics and whatnot. So I think when you're thinking about when individuals are thinking about their careers, this whole interrogation of who you are and where you find your energy is really important. And again, remember, uh, back to the same question, which is the dots will connect. You don't have to land that perfect thing in your very first job or the very first thing that you pick up. It'll happen over a period of time if you just give yourselves time to sit back, question yourselves, and be thoughtful.
Wonderful. So I will ask one more question now, and then lots of questions are coming in. So please, questions, comments. This is a great opportunity. Um, so the 100 million climate jobs, like the International Labor Organization, about 10 years ago, came out with some data saying, this is pre-COVID, that just to keep youth unemployment where it is around the world, in many countries it's 30, 40, 50%, we need to create 600 million new jobs just to keep unemployment where it is. So two questions here. One is the 100 million climate jobs. Like, what's this? Is that the source of that data? Is that a vision? Is based on something else? And then, is there any distribution of where those jobs should be? And how do you classify a climate job? And the last part of that question is is the assumption, is that the tipping point? I mean, both, as you said, we need policy, we need activism, we need organizing, we need startups, but like, is the idea if we actually reach that number, then maybe we're gonna have a better chance of keeping, getting to net zero or keeping below 1.5? Like, where does that number come from?
Yeah, no, great question. And let me, I think the best way to answer this question is to triangulate through a couple of data points. So, first of all, one thing to understand is that climate is going to underpin everything that we do over the next 20 years, whether we like it or not. That's how big the crisis is. So, as I mentioned, sectors like energy, agriculture, transport, all of them are going to fundamentally change. Now, to me, it has such strong parallels with the internet, which is when I started my career back in 1998, 1999. At that time, internet was called new media, and which is kind of this cute term for this belief that, oh, this is this nice fast growing media segment that will be on the side by itself. And here we are 20 years later, where internet underpins everything that we do, including our politics. And I think that's how climate is going to be. So first of all, it's going to suffuse into everything that we do over the next 20 years, which means these job opportunities are not just going to be new jobs. These are also going to be that if you are an accountant, your way of looking at accounting will change because of climate change. If you are a software engineer, the problems statements that you work on will change because you're because of the climate crisis and so on. So I think that's one. I think the way we see it is that uh, about if you just look at the largest corporations in the world, so the top Fortune 1000 companies have about a third of them have made commitments to net zero. If you look at the largest countries in the world, so about 70% of all carbon emissions now are under some kind of a net zero target, where both these corporations and governments have committed to reducing their emissions down to zero or net zero in the next couple of decades. What that means is that you have roughly 20 million people working in these corporations alone, for example, who need to be upskilled in all things climate. And as I mentioned, you could be a finance person, you could be a technology person, you could be a procurement and supply chain person, doesn't matter. There'll be climate and sustainability baked into everything that you do. So that's one source of this very large number. I think the reason I also bring the parallel to the internet is because back in 1998, 99, there were about a million or two people who were working on internet at that time. Uh, the number right now is about 150 to 200 million people working in the digital internet kind of a sector right now, and about 15 to 17% of the world's GDP is now the internet. In fact, the green economy is very much in that same place where you have about 2 million white collar jobs, about 10 million blue collar jobs all across the world, and about 7% of the global economy. This will become 15 to 20% of the global economy in the next 20 years. So if you do the math, the reverse math on that, that number comes out to be between 100 to 200 million across every single sector and every single geography. And I think that's one of the interesting parts about climate is that uh, action in the US in Silicon Valley will be just as important as action in Bangladesh and India on what they do with their renewables. So it is as widespread as possible, and therefore every kind of geography will need to be involved in that.
Wonderful. So I'll start bringing in the questions. So Anusha, who's based in Scotland, and I'm sure you get this question all the time. So
Yeah.
how do you move into the climate space? And again, I want to agree so much with what you're saying, that climate or any kind of social impact job, it can be graphic design, it can be finance, it can be organizing, it could be communication. So there's not just one job, it needs to be integrated into everything. But for people who want to move from building widgets or whatever to selling X towards climate, but they don't have climate experience, what are your suggestions?
Yeah, Anusha, it's a great question. And just like me, 2 years ago, I had no experience in climate. So this is the reason why we built Terra. So one of the things so we do multiple things at Terra, and maybe I'll quickly walk you through how each of those things work and help people who do not have relevant prior experience to get into climate. So we do three things. One is we run learning programs, and these are programs typically between 6 weeks to 12 weeks long, which give you a download on all things climate. And then there are specific programs, for example, for software engineers looking to moving into climate, designers looking to move into climate, folks with automotive background looking to move into climate, and so on. So you can participate in any of these programs. That's one. Second is that we run one of the largest climate job boards and the largest climate job fairs on the planet every week. So every week, and there's one 2 days from now, if you download the Terra app, you can see that there is a job fair which has about 10 climate companies and about 1,000 people like yourselves who are looking to work for those companies, just coming in, and these companies present and talk about what they're doing and of course the roles that they have open, and you can apply right away. I think the interesting part about the job fairs is as much the fact that you can immediately talk to hiring managers as the fact that when you go to this job fair you realize the breadth of climate solutions and the breadth of climate roles. So you'll see so for example, sometimes people have a mental model that climate is only for scientists and engineers, but when you look at the roles, these are companies which are selling, sure, hardware, but they have therefore sales teams, they have therefore marketing folks that they need, they have a lot of people on the legal side, on the regulatory side that need to be coming in, on the communication side. So these climate companies are like any other fast growing company that requires all of these different roles. And I think that's the sense that you'll get, which is if regardless of what skill you have right now, there are many jobs for that in climate companies today.
So next question comes from Raju, based in Colorado. How does climate, conflict, and poverty intersect? And how do you stay focused? I think basically given the huge challenges, how do you actually stay optimistic and decide what to work on?
That's a fantastic question, Raju. In fact, one of the things that uh, we have been very focused on from day one is that climate is a wicked problem, but not just because it affects all these different parts of the world, but also because it affects all of these different parts of the world in all kinds of different ways. In fact, if you look at the climate world, there is a whole mitigation part of it, and there is an adaptation and resilience part of it. Uh, at the expense of caricaturing a little bit, when I sit in Silicon Valley, the vast majority of people are excited about mitigation, right? They're thinking about how to capture carbon from the air and put it inside the rocks, or plant trees using drones and so on, which is, or build new kind of machinery that makes steel much less carbon intensive, which is all great, very important. We need all of that. But the reality for two-thirds of humanity is adaptation and resilience. The fact that climate change is already here, it's already causing sea level rise, it's already causing stronger droughts and stronger flooding patterns all across. And we saw this happen with Bangladesh and with Pakistan this year and so on. So from day one at Terra, the two or three ways that we have tried to capture that and make sure that we stay accountable to that. One is that we insist on all our cohorts being extremely global. So all our cohorts, a typical cohort will have about 40% of the people from the US, about 20% from Europe, and the rest of them from the developing world. We run scholarships and financial aid across the board. But for example, last cohort we did a scholarship for journalists specifically, which was entirely free. So if you were a journalist covering climate, then you could come into a program which is typically about $2,000 for free. And that we had about 10 people, including two journalists from Pakistan reporting on the floods, two from Nigeria who were part of the program. Even programming itself, uh, one of the classic I'll give you one example of a person who comes in. We get amazing speakers from all across climate solutions, but one example is Dr. Harish Hande, who is the founder of this off-grid solar company called Celco, and is a Magsaysay Award winner, which is like a Nobel Prize for social work. And Harish comes in, and his lens on climate change is actually through poverty. So he starts out with the energy, with the rural energy access, and goes from there. So that integration is extremely important.
So we have a great question from Anne. Thanks, Anne. In terms of careers, is it better to train in environment, sustainability, and governance, or CSR, or is it better to be more specific to sustainability and climate roles? And I'm going to add a question here because this came up recently. Because we do a lot of PCN. I still teach at universities, but I was full-time professor for 10 years. And at PCN, we do a lot on the future of work and upskilling and social impact. So a related question to this is, do you advise people to go to grad school or do university certificates or to do upskilling on their own? Or like how does, and also how does Terra.do compare if someone does a certificate at Oxford or Cambridge or NYU in terms of career development?
Yeah, no, I'll take let me take the first question. So first of all, ESG is a massive space that is hiring incredibly. So in fact, PwC announced, I think about 6 months back, that they're going to hire 100,000 ESG consultants. And PwC is a big company, but it's not that big. And but more importantly, I think it it gives you a very interesting data point. The fact that the big four firms of the world are tooling up in this massive numbers for ESG means that they're seeing incredible amount of demand from their clients for ESG related services. So first of all, I think that's a great career path to be potentially going in. ESG obviously has a lot of, just like all sectors that really get hot very quickly, has a lot of hype also built in, some of it unwarranted, but that's your job to go in and kind of figure out the wheat from the chaff. But I think it's a great career path to be going into. And at the same time, you could also start working directly in industry in sustainability roles. So you could be working at Unilever and starting to work on the supply chains. Just to give you to connect it back to the previous question about what about prior experience. So you would be surprised or maybe not surprised to hear that in large corporations, 2/3 of existing sustainability roles are filled by people who have no degrees in sustainability. These are people often coming from HR, procurement, sales kind of backgrounds who raise their hands and say, I care about this topic. I'm going to figure it out. So these are still very early days. So by all means, jump in. Then to the question around other certificates and programs, I think so. I love. I mean, I live on Stanford campus. They have now a new $2 billion climate school. They're going to churn out a few hundred PhDs and some master's students every year, which is great. I think we need a lot more of that. I think the Cambridge, Oxford programs are also very nice. The plug that I would make is two things. One is we don't have a lot of time. So we don't have a lot of time to do long 2-year, 5-year, 10-year things anymore, unfortunately. So when in doubt, I think there are great programs, but when in doubt, focus a lot more on programs that get you working in climate as quickly as possible because we need you right now. Terra is structured like that, but there are other programs also that are structured like that. The other thing I think, which and I want to call out, was the big realization for me was that it is not just about going reading and learning 20 topics in climate. That's not going to get you working in climate immediately. That is great. You have now a framework. What you really need in addition to that is a community and a network. And at Terra, that's what we're very obsessively focused on, which is how do we surround you with 10 to 20 people who are like you, who care about your career outcome, including our own instructors, but also 2,000 to 20,000 other people that you could reach out from the alumni network and say, hey, I went through the Terra program. I discovered you because you came in for a talk that you gave. What kind of opportunities do you have? So this whole community and network thing is really important because career transitions are not easy. It's not easy to just like one fine day wake up and say, I'm going to work in this sector instead. You need to build your own network. And that's something we do. I think we do better than almost anyone else out there.
So thanks so much. So next question comes from Debo. I think she's based in Ghana, but remind us, or he, what are the climate jobs and skills available for Africans and how can an entrepreneur like me benefit from them? Yeah, so is there anything specific to particular regions?
I think one thing, Debo, I don't know if you've seen this yourselves, but of the many different sectors which are growing very quickly in Africa, renewables and specifically off-grid solar are two areas where I have seen a lot of companies, a lot of capital, and a lot of new jobs being created. There is, in fact, a specific website run by a friend of mine based out of Nairobi, which is called Shortlist, shortlist.net. Yeah. So
yeah, Paul was on the podcast last week.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Yes, yes.
So that's the kind of work that if you look at what they are doing, and they would have some great pointers about what's happening in Africa as well.
Yeah, because Paul and Shortlist, I mean, they have a wonderful startup that's helping to both people upskill, but also headhunting for impact. But particularly in Africa, they're doing a tremendous amount in partnership with donors on upskilling for green careers. So he was on the podcast last week. You can find it on our website. It'll
Okay,
be anyway. So Shortlist is wonderful. So
that's
the
awesome.
next question comes from Raju. How do you define sustainability? And then this is right now. Raju's in a course I'm teaching on investing for social impact professionals. So we spend a lot of time talking about greenwashing and how to
Mhm.
differentiate. So how do you define sustainability, and does Terra.do do any, how do you help people to discover jobs where it's not greenwashing, or how do you hold companies accountable?
No, it's a great question, Rajan. And I think I must say that at best, it's a work in progress. And the interesting thing that we've realized, so first of all, we don't work with fossil fuel companies at all. Even though, for what it's worth, fossil fuel companies are actually massively ramping up their renewables divisions, and they need a lot of talent to come in to start building wind turbines for them and so on. But we don't work for them primarily because of that reason, which is it's not entirely clear what the ultimate motive is. And even as we every once in a while, when we get closer to thinking that, oh, maybe they have turned a new leaf, something happens, you see in the news, and you're like, oh god, the same old thing continues forever. So that's one. But I think the on the greenwashing side, the uh, these I think the signals to look for, first of all, in a given corporate is that, first of all, if they have first of all, do they have any net zero or climate targets at all? And if they have, then are they science-based targets? So SBTI is this nonprofit which has done a fantastic job of getting corporations to commit to targets that actually make an impact on climate, as opposed to something that are just greenwashing. So we look for that. I think the other interesting phenomena that we've also observed is that there is often this gap inside large corporations where there is someone at the senior leadership level, at the board or at the CEO level, who truly genuinely cares. Then there is the mass of employees, maybe 5 to 10% of them, who are banding by themselves together to do something sustainable, some green thing inside the company, just to get anything started. That's how much energy and desire they have. And then there is the reality of the entire business in between, where stuff may or may not happen, things may or may not move. So what we are trying to do with Terra is, and that's the reason why we started out not with enterprises first. We started with individuals first. So you would have individuals raising their hands from these very large companies coming into our programs. And once we start seeing sufficient critical mass of them, we use them as the champions to go inside enterprises and not the other way around. Because in the other way around, there's always this danger. Are you just potentially just signing on to a program that doesn't really have any true sustainability intentions beyond just what shows up in the annual report? But it's a work in progress. I think there is this, it's not an easy problem.
Okay. So Anne has a question. She saw a sustainability role recently advertised, which had over 800 applications or applicants. How do we encourage more employers to hire for roles that are sustainability first, or at least equal, particularly when there's the threat of a global recession?
Yes. So I think, and you're pointing two different things, right? So one is that how much latent energy there is for the few sustainability roles that there are, and therefore people raising their hands and saying, I want to work for this. And second, on the other side, which is how few sustainability roles there are in the first place, given what a massive transformation we're talking about. I think you both are spot on. On the first one, I think maybe just to connect the two, the there's a bit of a there's the battle and there's the war, right? So the battle is what happens this quarter, sometimes even what happens this year. And we would have COP26 happen that'll create incredible amount of energy, and it feels like a great year. Everyone makes commitments. And then there is a global recession that happens where everyone starts backtracking a little bit on their commitments and so on. But if you look at the overall scale of the crisis, and more importantly, the scale of the opportunity, uh, what that means. So the scale of the crisis means that the the worst climate and the climate catastrophes that we're looking at, they are, every signal in science says they're going to get worse. Politics, elections, etc., are going to get fought and won and lost on those. And Australia is a great example. I don't know if you followed what happened in Australia. It went from this country which is completely on the other side, on the bad side of the climate spectrum, to something which is now beginning to look a lot more progressive. And the entire politics changed overnight because Australia cannot run away from these consequences anymore. So that's the war part of it, which is that the historical arc bends in the direction of climate action. So even if you have recessionary times, that's one. I think the other thing which is also to understand is that this is my profit part of the spiel, not just the purpose part of the spiel, which is that the amount of capital that has come into climate at every single stage, not just early stage startup investing, but even in the public markets and everything in between, is just incredible. I think climate was last year the second largest category in early stage in venture investing, which is saying a lot, right? It's second largest is like largest is AI, and second largest is climate, which is a very big deal. So the amount of capital that is coming in, and it's coming in because everyone sees that there is the chance to completely disrupt the biggest players in steel, the biggest players in shipping, the biggest players in aviation. These are now talking about $1 trillion industries. So therefore, there's an incredible amount of excitement that we are now talking about a historical shift that could be potentially even bigger than the internet. And therefore, you have all the seven sins in a way kind of playing in climate now. So everything from altruism, which is great, but also greed. And we need greed too for massive global scale transformation to happen. We need fear as well. So, oil and gas executives who now realize that there's no more new exploration happening, that coal is going to just completely plummet from here on. It might take 2 years longer than everyone thought, but only 2 years longer, which means that everyone is now waking up to the fact that they're going to be able to build career, create wealth, and have an impact by working in climate and sustainability.
Yeah, and where we live in Colombia, we have a relatively new government, which is, trying to end a lot of hydrocarbon exploration and, no more fracking and really trying to go to the green economy. And one of the major oil companies just announced, I think, a 40 billion peso, investment in alternatives because if the oil companies want to survive, they're going to have, it's going to be a transition period. So
Yeah.
we'll finish in 3 minutes. Thank you everyone for joining. So 3 quick questions. One is, for someone who doesn't know Terra.do as a potential individual, how do they engage and what's free and what costs?
So it's the simplest thing. You can download our app. You can go to Android Play Store. You can go to iOS store and just download the Terra app. It's completely free. You can create a profile, and after that, you will have access to a lot of learning material that we have created, all the jobs, and a huge global community that you can start reaching out to. So it's entirely free. It's only our programs, the immersive cohort-based programs, that cost money.
Okay. And then how can others help Terra.do? I mean, obviously sign up, but let's say if it's organizations, nonprofits, foundations, like, are you looking for people to enroll or kind of what other type of partnership students or things would help Terra.do?
So we're one of the ways that we would love to get help is that we're trying to get a lot more of two kinds of people into the Terra ecosystem. One is professional young college grads, so people who are graduating from programs right now who want to be working in climate and sustainability. We would love to have a lot more of them. So if you have partnerships with universities or you have access to professional programs that are graduating all these individuals, that would be great. Second one, we would love to get a lot more of trade folks coming in. So people with backgrounds in like as electricians, as plumbers, etc., who are looking to now do HVAC and heat pump installations and so on. We would love to have access to them and get them also to the platform. I think, Craig, what we're trying to build is a bit like a LinkedIn for climate, where anyone who's working in the climate economy should be on Terra. And these are some segments we'd love to get.
So last 2 very quick questions. Is Terra.do hiring at all for your platform? Are you hiring or anticipate hiring in the next few months?
Unfortunately, we have paused hiring for the next few months. But hopefully we will be able to revive that soon. But
Okay.
there are lots of climate companies which are hiring right now on
And then
Terra.
last quick question in terms of your own well-being, what are you working on learning or upskilling? And it could be for professional stuff or just fun. So is it a book you're reading, a movie, a course? Like what are you working on when you're not working on Terra or with your family?
Yeah, so I am trying to learn surfing. And I had always kind of put that away because the water here in near San Francisco is not that warm. But I finally got a wetsuit, so I should be able to be out there in the nature a lot more and just being there physically, not with my mind shut off.
Okay. Well, one quick story before we finish. So I ski raced for many years, and we have a very athletic, almost 12-year-old who's very competitive in soccer. And we went to the coast in Colombia a few years ago, and we took a surfing lesson. And I figured because I skied, it'd be easy. I could not stay up for more than 1 second, and he was like cruising around me. So surfing, I got to try again. But thank you so much for taking time to share your wisdom and expertise, and thank you everyone for joining us. This is the last episode of the season. We'll start again in January. Check out Terra.do, check out the Rotary Peace Fellowship. I'm actually going to put you in contact with them because I can see a lot of synergy. Check out PCDN. And what is your wife writing her PhD on? And then we'll stop.
Uh, she's a civil engineer, so she's working on sustainable construction.
Okay. Thank you so much. And everyone, please share Terra.do super widely. Sign up, check it out, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Anshuman.
for thank you for having me, Craig, and everyone. Happy holidays.
Thank you.